All right, it's time for another FTP Podcast. We're going to spend a lot of time talking football today. Training camps are about to get started, so we'll talk a little NFL, kind of take a look at the landscape. We'll talk a little bit about Tom Brady wanting to pay a fine. We'll talk a little bit about Russell Wilson wanting a huge contract. I got all that, plus as always, we got our moment in sports history. Stick around, good stuff coming up.
This is the FTP Podcast.
All right, let's jump right into this Deflate-Gate topic. I mean, come on, this thing has been going on all summer, and at this point, there's a couple of new developments. Goodell supposedly is receiving pressure from some older owners to uphold the suspension of Tom Brady, and now Tom Brady's offering to pay a fine, saying that he was wrong for not aiding in the investigation, but he's not admitting guilt and just doesn't want to be suspended. Now, for me, I think that should he be suspended? Yes. Should he necessarily be labeled a cheater? That's debatable. I think, number one, you're setting a precedent. He didn't aid in the investigation. He actually deterred the investigation as much as possible. So if you don't suspend him and just let him pay a fine, what's that saying to future guys that aren't on his level necessarily, but they're being investigated for something? They can just not aid in the investigation and pay a simple fine and stay on the field. So you're going to see a lot of guys saying, okay, I'm going to follow Tom Brady's lead. He didn't get suspended. He didn't help in the investigation. Regardless of if he admits that he should have aided and should have been more forthcoming with the things, he didn't forthcome with that information. He did withhold as much as possible to make things as difficult as possible. So whether he had something that could have exonerated him or, shown his guilt, he didn't provide that. So now, while the things are inconclusive, you still have to say, in my opinion, that at some point he knew. At some point he was involved, just based on the fact that he did not aid in this thing. Now, if you want to say, all right, we're not going to suspend him based on the deflating of the footballs, that's one thing. But the fact that he did not aid in the investigation is a whole nother ball game. And personally, now I'm not saying that there's a precedent for this or how many games he should be gone for this, but you have to take a stand, because if this is going to be the NFL's route for handling these cases, where you're going to have an independent investigator go in and look into them, you have to have guys cooperate. And if Tom Brady can get away with just paying a fine and then not being suspended for not participating in the investigation, you're going to see guys farther down the line do similar things, because, to be 100% honest, while he's going to be able to investigate something without the participation of the player, a lot of the evidence is going to end up being more than likely inconclusive, because the things that these guys are having to go and independently investigate are things where a lot of the information is in the hands, in that cell phone from the player. It's in different documentation or different things that said player would have and that no one else may have. So, I mean, you can look at, let's say, the Jonathan Martin situation. If Richie Incognito or Martin hadn't been forthcoming with cell phone records, cell phone messages, things like that, how much of a report really could have been put together? How detailed of a conclusion could he really have come to? Because then he's going off secondhand information the entire way through. So you have to have these guys understand that you have to participate in these investigations. So that's a whole nother ballgame. On a complete side note, Greg Williams did an interview earlier this week saying that he still stands by the fact that in Bountygate, the Saints did nothing wrong in that. And, I'm passionate. I'm still waiting for the conclusive evidence in that. It's just complete jargon, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. And, I have a very strong and detailed opinion of Roger Goodell and his decision-making policies. But so be it. My one thing is, if you're going to say ignorance isn't an excuse, for one, you need to say ignorance isn't an excuse for all. So that's the only thing that has made me say that Tom Brady should be suspended for Deflate-Gate. Not that there's conclusive evidence, not that this isn't a league-wide policy, but for the fact that he's already set a precedent. In the court of law, you work off of precedents. So if you said ignorance isn't an excuse, you need to be thorough with ignorance is not an excuse. So that being said, regardless of if he went ahead, like that's why I said that the front office, the head coach, the general manager, all should have been held responsible for this in some way, shape, or form, because ignorance is not an excuse, and that was what he used to condemn the New Orleans Saints during that process, and saying that while this may have been something that was league wide or a widespread process, we're going to say ignorance is not an excuse, and we're going to make an example of you to get this out of the league. So while other quarterbacks have come and said, I like my balls tampered with and we don't see this as a big deal or a game changer, the point is, if it's a rule, whether it's being broken by one or broken by all, it's still a rule that's being broken. And whether it was done with knowledge or not, ignorance isn't an excuse. And you're not going to tell me that you couldn't tell that the ball was deflated, overinflated, normal. You're just not going to explain that to me. And even if you didn't want, if you want to say, okay, Tom Brady had nothing to do with it, boom, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with saying, he went on the field and played with the ball that was handed to him. That's fine. But if the ball was tampered with, someone in the building should be held responsible. And in my opinion, just based off precedent here, it should have been the head coach, because it is his building. He is the one in charge. And in the Deflate-Gate, not the Deflate-Gate, in the Bounty-Gate situation, ignorance was not considered an excuse. All right, that's enough of that. All right, moving on. We're looking at Russell Wilson. He is trying to get this long-term deal done, and right now ESPN's reporting that they had a $21 million a year deal, and Russell's still wanting more. Now, I've been a Russell Wilson fan since he came in the league. I remember in the draft process, I loved this kid. The thing that I've always repeated is I remember Mel Kiper saying that if he was a couple inches taller, we'd probably be talking about a top 5 pick. I don't give a damn how tall he is. If the kid can play, the kid can play, which he's come in the NFL and proven. Now, that being said, I am a huge fan of his, but is he worth this kind of mega money? Has he earned it? Hell yeah, he's earned it. He's gone out and produced. But do I necessarily... I think there's a lot of quarterbacks who are overappreciated, and there are a lot of quarterbacks who are underappreciated. And you're also... but obviously this all comes to do with situation. Now, do I think Russell Wilson is the type of player who can carry a team today on his back? Not necessarily. I think he's a very talented quarterback. And I think his playoff record speaks for himself. His entire playing, his NFL career record speaks for volumes. I mean, the kid came in, won a starting job as a rookie, and helped turn around the Seattle Seahawks franchise, turned them into a Super Bowl champion. I think that says enough on its own. Now, that being said, when you start talking about NFL contenders, obviously you start looking at who's manning the helm of these teams. Because Buffalo has a great roster. I mean, you're talking about LaShawn McCoy, the receiving core, but can you really talk about them as a Super Bowl contender because they don't have a quarterback at the helm? I mean, who's throwing the ball to these guys? So the answer is no. But if you put Russell Wilson on that team, I'd automatically consider them almost a favorite, at least to make it a deep playoff run. So that being said, a quarterback can change the complexity of a team. So you have to pay this guy. But do I necessarily think he is worth, he's worth elite quarterback money? I'm not sure, because I don't think he can carry a team today. Now, obviously, when you do these kind of contracts, you're not paying him for what he's going to be today. You're paying him, or at least his agent and him want to be paid for what he's going to be at the end of the contract. So he's going to get the money. He's definitely worth it. He's definitely one of the upper echelon of quarterbacks in the league. But I always hear people talk about these guys, and I heard an argument the other day saying Joe Flacco was underappreciated in Baltimore because you look at his playoff record, you look at his record in like December and things like that. And my answer to those sort of things, because Russell Wilson has the same kind of numbers, once it gets late in the season, his numbers get great, and his playoff record is wonderful. Well, you have to look at the types of teams that these guys play on. In cold weather, what's the thing that you want to do? Because it demoralizes a defense. It'll wear them down really quickly. You want to run the ball, plain and simple. And both of the guys that are brought up ideally in this conversation are guys that are on teams that pride themselves on being physical, running attack offenses, and have physical defenses. So while that's not taking anything away from these guys, they could still fall completely flat on their face in that kind of weather, in that kind of environment. I think that also plays a role in why they've been able to be successful in those kind of situations, as opposed to a guy necessarily like an Andrew Luck who carries the team on his back. You put him in a game where, you can put him in a blizzard game. His numbers may not be the same as Joe Flacco or Russell Wilson, but he still may be able to. But his success is indicative to his team's success. Luck is the Colts right now. He is carrying that team on his back. It's the same situation as when Peyton Manning. If Andrew Luck got hurt in week 1 and missed the entire rest of the season, that Colts team would struggle to win 4 games. Struggle. So as opposed to a Russell Wilson or a Joe Flacco, if either one of them went down, both of their teams, I'd say easily could probably still win 6 games. I'm not saying they'd be in the playoffs or even be contenders or anything like that, but at the same time, there's a lot more pressure on certain quarterbacks' backs. So I think that's the argument that I have when you start looking at how these guys are being rated, how these guys are being paid, and how you start looking at numbers. Now, like I said, I've been a huge Russell Wilson fan. I love his work ethic. I love his attitude as a quarterback. So do I think he's going to get paid? Of course. Would I let him walk out of Seattle? Hell no. So you got to pay the guy. But when you start looking at the numbers and start making arguments of, oh, he's the top quarterback in the league and things like that, or a guy is overappreciated or underappreciated, you got to look at the situation. Like if you look at a situation with Aaron Rodgers, the world is on his shoulders. You look at Tom Brady, he gets a little bit more balance, but for the most part, the world is still on his shoulders. Peyton Manning, world on his shoulders. The entire thing is revolving around those guys, as opposed to a guy like Russell Wilson where they still want to primarily run the ball. That's what they want to do. Now, that's not saying that that's a bad thing. I fully believe in running the ball. I think you can run the ball to set up the pass. You can throw the ball to set up the run. It's either way. It's whatever you feel like works for your team. And I think that's what a coach is supposed to do. Take a look at the players that he has and use that opportunity to set up for the most success. So I think it would be completely stupid. I hate coaches that come in and say, I have a system and we're going to run my system. That's so stupid. That's so damn dumb. If you don't have the players to run your system, what you going to do? Sit there and lose until you try and get them? That's so stupid. You adjust to the players that you have and then bring in players that fit your system. And once you have the players that fit your system, then you run your system. All right, let me stop because I'm getting a little bit on a rant. Let's hit the reset button real quick. We'll take a quick break, come right back, and we'll get into some other stuff.
This is the FTP Podcast.
All right, went on a bit of a tangent before. All right, we're going to jump back on the schedule. All right, we got a couple other headlines. Junior Gillette cut by the Saints, and this one just astounded me. I mean, you do not let pass rushers in their prime hit the free agent market. So somebody's going to nab him up in a second, but the Saints have had all kind of off-the-field headaches with this guy. I mean, he had the domestic abuse video earlier this summer that he was able to, with the girl calling 911. Then he had another one that came out that was supposedly from a couple of years ago where he was on the beach and he hit the girl with the belt. And then, he's had leadership problems calling out some of the old guys that were off the Saints. And the sad thing is a lot of those same guys, Bobby McCray, Will Smith, when he got cut, they all kind of trolled him on Twitter, posting laughing videos and GIFs and stuff like that. So clearly this was not a very well-liked player. But somebody's going to pick him up and somebody's going to get some production from him because you just simply don't let pass rushers in their prime hit the free agent market like that. And it's kind of odd because the Saints just gave him a big contract extension last offseason. So They're losing a lot of money to cut him. So you got to think that these offseason problems and these off-the-field issues kind of became exuberant. There's some reports he even got in a pregame fight with one of his former teammates, Brandon Diedrich, last season, which is a problem. You can't fight your own team. I mean, come on. Come on, son. Come on. All right, let's switch in gears to college football. Ohio State quarterback Braxton Miller is supposedly making a switch to wide receiver. Urban Meyer says not so fast because he hasn't signed off on the move just yet, but Braxton has already said that that's what he thinks is happening because his shoulder is not quite where he wants it to be. I've gone on record saying, why don't you transfer? Because you know he's not starting at quarterback. I mean, I guess, yeah, at the next level, the odds of him ending up being a quarterback are probably pretty slim. But he has the opportunity to show more at quarterback. And who knows, if he has a good season this year playing quarterback, he could have. And, you know, they have Les Miles went on record that if Braxton would have been transferring, he would have definitely been interested. You imagine Braxton going to LSU? He has a great running game. The defense is historically pretty good. They have some talented receivers there. You think he couldn't have turned in a decent season? Come on now. So now he's going to go to wide receiver. Obviously, he said he's the best athlete in college football in the past, and now he's going to get the opportunity to prove it. And it could prove to be a good move for him. Maybe he goes out, shows up, and even improves his draft stock in the NFL that way. I appreciate loyalty. I appreciate a lot of things. But if you've been playing quarterback, he's been pretty successful playing quarterback too. You got to give yourself the opportunity to play. Just my opinion. Just my little old opinion. All right, a couple other things. NBA, Kyrie Irving cleared by doctors to begin working out, but he has a long recovery ahead. That's after he fractured his kneecap in the NBA Finals. I said I think it's going to be interesting to see how Kyrie does moving forward. It's going to be interesting to look at that Cavs team moving forward. Him and LeBron really got to find a way to mesh a little bit better than they did most of last season. All right, sticking with NBA, Josh Smith. He took a page out of Latrell Sprewell's book claiming a $6.9 million salary that he's going to rake in this season, and it's going to make it hard on him and his family to meet ends. Really? Really? I remember a guy, the Saints, Charles Grant, he said he was wanting a new contract and said he has to be able to feed his family. Come on now. $6.9 million and it's going to be hard for you to make ends meet. You need to get some cost cutting, buddy. All right, there was an awkward moment at a Lakers press conference when a reporter asked whether Kobe reached out to any of his new teammates. And, you know, that's just not really Kobe. That's not who he is. He didn't reach out to welcome any of his new teammates, Roy Hibbert, Lou Williams, and Brandon Bass. That's just not who Kobe is. Kobe's never been known as the exceptional teammate. He's a leader. He's going to come in and practice hard. He's going to give you what you get on the court. He's going to give you what you get in practice. He's going to give you that attitude and that demeanor, that winning approach. But he's never been known as a great teammate. And you can ask Smush Parker about that one. Chicago Bears legend, NFL legend, Walter Payton. His birthday was Saturday, July 25th. He graced the NFL field for 13 years and is still arguably the league's best running back. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler, a Hall of Famer. He passed away at the age of 45. All right, going to MLB, big moment. Cole Hamels, the third pitcher this season to throw a no-hitter. He held the Cubs in check with some solid defensive help from his teammates. Couldn't have done it without them to get the final out. That was Hamels' first no-hitter of his career and the first at Wrigley Field since 1972. 72. That's almost a moment in sports history. But I got something a little bit better. 1997 head coach Don Shula, New York Giants owner Wilmington Mara, and Pittsburgh's Mike Webster, and Oakland/New England's Mike Haynes were elected into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we'll talk about this year's Hall of Fame inductees next week. All right, thanks again. You know the drill. Google us, FromThePressBox, FTP_tweets. Type it in. We'll pop up. Follow us, subscribe, do all of that. We'll be back next week. See you.